Hi, I'm Jacqueline from Arrive Yoga and Mindfulness. And this sequence is to help us find the lines of energy from our outer hips down into the feet. So you will need a wall to press your feet into as you're lying on the floor, and a yoga tie, and also either a foam block or a Gurdie ball. So please come onto your back, stretch yourself out with your feet at the wall, with the back of your heels on the floor. So if you've got a baseboard like I do, rather than resting your heels on the baseboard, bring your heels right to the floor. And then turn your legs so that they're facing the ceiling. So your knees and your feet directly looking up. And to just take a moment to also position your pelvis, your torso, your shoulders in such a way that it feels like your spine is coming out of the wall perpendicularly, that you're not off on an angle or side bending, that there's a nice sense of elongation through the spine as your legs reach into the wall. And then to feel the footprints on the wall, can you find what we call the four corners of the feet? So the mounds of the big toes, the mounds of the baby toes, the inner heels, and the outer heels. And we're just going to play with a little bit of movement of energy from the pelvis down through the legs and into the feet. And we're going to start with the outer hips and feeling a sense of reaching the legs into the wall from your outer hips down through the outer seams of the legs, outer knees, outer shins, down into the outer edges of the feet. So the mounds of the baby toes and the outer heels, and press into the wall through those outer lines, and just get a sense of how this feels in the legs and what this feels like in the knees, in the back of the pelvis, the sacrum. It might feel like the legs are slightly bowing, right? The feet, sort of the soles of the feet, turning a little towards the midline or towards each other. Yeah, and then just pause, so relax and rest, and just take a moment here before we try something else. We're going to go from the inner thigh, so the groins, reaching the legs into the wall through the inner seams of the legs, inner knees, inner ankles, down into the inner edges of the feet, so the mounds of the big toes and the inner heels. And go ahead. Press into the wall through those inner lines of the legs. Notice what engages. Right? Notice how the knee joints feel. It might feel like the knees want to come in towards each other a little bit as the feet fan away from each other. Okay, and then release, let it go. And you may just spend a few more moments here playing with reaching the legs into the wall from the outer hips through the outer seams and into the wall from the inner thighs all the way down to the inner edges of the feet. A little back and forth, back and forth. And then we're going to find a place where it feels like we're reaching the legs into the wall from both the outer and inner seams of the legs, so that the four corners of the feet now are firmly planted. And as you do this, notice how this feels in the pelvis and in the sacrum at the back of the body. When I say notice how it feels, I'm trying not to suggest how it feels. So it's more for you to explore the difference when you're more engaged to the outer legs or more engaged to the inner legs. And then when we bring it into balance, what changes in your experience? So we're going to then bring one knee in and take hold of the thigh, and circling the thigh here in your hip socket. And let this movement be not forceful, nice and slow and easy. The left leg is still engaged with the wall. So the left leg reaching into the wall through the outer and inner seams of the legs, finding the four corners there of the left foot. Yeah, go the other direction with that thigh. So we're finding some engagement and stability there through the left leg, while we're finding some ease and movement here in the right hip. And then from here, we're going to take the right foot into the thigh and begin to stretch this right leg up towards the ceiling. Yeah, in the same way that we did at the wall. So from this outer hip up to the outer edge of the foot, from the inner thigh up into the inner edge of the foot. And take a few breaths here to straighten and open the back of the knee. And it might be that your leg is here, right? And if that's true, you could let the thigh hold you in place. Just see if you can keep the shoulders and head resting into the ground so that we're not pulling the shoulders and head off the floor, that there's some sense of grounding and settling through the chest and through the head. So then next we're going to take this right leg across the midline, across the body to the left. And we're going to turn this right thigh in towards the midline so that the knee and the foot is looking more towards the left shoulder than it is towards the right. And then very carefully taking the straight leg across the body, and you won't probably need to go very far until you feel quite a big sensation, a stretch happening somewhere, likely in the outer line of the leg from the outer hip down to the outer foot. But you might also feel it in the hamstring. Just to say, I'm keeping my left leg still engaged at the wall. Drop the shoulders, relax the head, soften your face. Find your breath. Let the breath drop into the sensation. Right? The breath is going to help to nourish and irrigate the connective tissue as you're stretching it. Okay, and we don't have to stay there very long. We're going to bring this leg back to center, bend the knee, release your foot, and then stretch this leg out, release it out along the floor. Let both legs relax for a moment and take in any newness, any change. How does that right leg feel? Right hip, how does the right hip feel? Okay, and we'll do the other side, engaging now the right leg in the wall, into the wall from the outer hip, into the outer edge of the foot, from the inner thigh into the inner edge of the foot. You might have to scooch a little bit closer to the wall, right? Just to re-engage that leg. And then, taking that left thigh into your arms, into your hands, and just gently circling and moving that thigh in different directions without force. Right? Some of these connective tissues here can become quite tight. And the connective tissue does not like force. It does not want to be pulled apart. It needs gentle movement, breath, encouragement. Okay, and then bringing that leg back to the center, we're going to loop the tie around this foot, stretching this leg up, coming into a leg stretch on this side. Yeah, just noticing where you're feeling it. And your leg might be here, right? Could be here. If it's any lower than there, I might suggest that you do this instead at the wall so that the weight of your leg can rest on the wall or a chair and you don't have to work so hard in the upper body, keeping the leg elevated. And yeah, breathing, lengthening, pressing both legs away from you, out into the four corners of the feet. And then we'll take this leg and turn it inward. So the thigh in the hip socket, internally rotating. So the knee and the foot is looking towards the right shoulder, or more towards the right shoulder than towards the left shoulder. For me, it's actually looking more towards my face. And then let's begin to take this leg across the midline, keeping your left pelvic half on the ground. So we haven't rolled the pelvis over to the side. Reminder, I have to remind myself, right? Keeping the shoulders relaxed. You could think of the heart, right? The physical heart here, relaxing back into the pillow of the lungs. Yeah, the heart resting back into the pillow of the lungs. And then as you're ready, let's bring this leg back to center, bend the knee, release the tie, stretch this foot, this leg out along the floor towards the wall. Yeah, just giving your legs a little waggle, right? So turning them in and turning them out. Yeah, turning them in, turning them out, the action happening from the thighs and the hip sockets. All right, we're going to go from here. This is where you're going to need your foam block or your Gertie ball. And bend the knees and bring your feet flat to the floor. And have your heels right underneath your knees so that the shins are vertical and the feet are about hip width apart. And we're going to place this prop, ball or block between the knees and hugging the ball. They're just enough to keep it in place and to begin to feel the adductors, the thigh muscles engaging. Now, we're going to come back here to the lines of energy in the legs. And as you're hugging the ball, can you engage the legs? Meaning, can you press the feet into the ground? Not just the feet pressing into the ground, but it's like you could draw the outer hips down through the outer seams of the legs and pressing the outer edges of the feet into the ground. Just noticing how that feels. Can you keep the ball pressing? Keep pressing the ball there between the knees. Let the shoulders soften, head relax. And then release, let go. You can take the ball out for a moment. kind of reset before we try something else. Bring the ball back between the knees this time. Inner thighs or the groins all the way down into the inner edges of the feet as you hold the ball in place. You might, to try to find that energy of the mounds of the big toes pressing into the floor, you might lift all your toes, spread them, and then imagine you're kind of stamping something underneath the mound of the big toes, like a penny, like you're holding a penny there under the mounds of the big toes. Yeah, and again, it's a little bit different, isn't it, from when we reach into the ground through the outer legs and feet. So let's pause, take the ball out. Just maybe sway the legs a little side to side. We're going to reset and come back again. This time, lots of power in the legs, from the outer hips to the outer edges of the feet, from the inner groins into the inner edges of the feet, and holding the ball in place. A lot. Yeah, it's a lot. So let the breath move. In yoga, right, we talk about the balance between effort and ease, and how the poses, the yoga poses, are also expressions of effort and ease, a balance between sthira and sukha, or steadiness and ease. So there's some steadiness, there's some effort here in the legs and the feet, holding the ball, and a sense of ease for the spine, resting here and maybe even stretching a little bit out through the crown of the head, a sense of ease in the shoulders, in the heart, resting back into the lungs. And then as you're ready, let's take the ball out, give the legs a little swishing side to side. There's one more action that I'd like us to try. We're going to take the ball back between the knees, and we're going to now think about the outer hips, reaching from the outer hips now down into the inner edges of the feet. Outer hips to the inner edges of the feet. Lift your toes. Outer hips down into the inner edges of the feet, and keep pressing, keep pressing, keep pressing, and see if the pelvis then can lift up off the ground. Lift your toes and find the outer hips reaching down into the mounds of the big toes. Now I'm turning my head to talk to you, and I would like you to keep your head looking directly up towards the ceiling and keeping some space there in the throat, meaning you're not collapsing your chin towards your chest. There's some space there for breath, resting the shoulders back. What's happened in the legs and the feet? Can you re-engage outer hips down into the inner edges of the feet, holding the ball in place with equal amounts of energy coming from the left and right leg, equal amounts of effort coming from the left and right leg, holding the ball. And then as you're ready to come out, slowly exhaling and letting the pelvis drop. Okay, and then taking the ball out, and once again, reaching the legs away from you, giving them a little waggle, So I would suggest, if you have time, to go through that sequence again on your own. Yeah, whichever pieces feel most helpful for you. Thank you so much for joining me in practice today. I hope that was helpful. I'll see you again.